by these oh yeah. Oh, you know what? Who did somebody push the recording? Because the recording just started. I forgot to push the recording button. So that means everything that I said right before all this never worked. I'm sorry about that, you guys. But we are being recorded. All right, so let me recap quickly what's taking place here. Let me go back for a second, if you don't mind. See the telephone number at the top of the screen, 630-858-4567. If the screen goes blank and you can't see me, or you can't hear anything from me, or you can't see any type of slides because I got knocked off, and then so on and so forth, give me 3 to 5 minutes. Somebody give me a call to find out what's going on. So call me at that number is what that was all about. And the other thing that was mentioned earlier, besides the fact that you all got that form for explaining the quizzes, or that email that gave you the quiz dates and things of that nature, was on the calculation that was on short sales. Okay, where is that calculation? Let's see if it's, there it is. When I did the calculation, I had used the in the formula on margin 1 minus 0.33, and it should have been 1 minus 0.3, which was what the maintenance margin percent was, which would have given us 5/7, and then that would have gotten the same answer was correct. We had the right answer. I just put in 0.33. Okay, that's all it was. Now let's move on here. All right, so going back to the state registration, where we are, there we go, on the state registration. So because there was a lot of junk going on out there, and worthless securities being issued by various type of unscrupulous, they call them unscrupulous companies, and they were promoting a whole lot of things, the states took some action and said, hey, we want advisors that are going to be selling in our state to be registered. We want the firms that they represent to be registered. We want the securities to be registered. So that's what state laws, blue sky laws, are all about. Okay. As you can see, this particular statement here, the second bullet point, the National Exchange listed securities are automatically blue sky in every state. All right. Each state does have securities regulation officials to enforce the laws. So the bottom line is, be aware of blue sky is representative of the state type regulations. This blue sky stuff started back in 1911 in the state of Kansas, and then, as you can imagine, what happened when we had the Depression is that there were a lot of different federal laws that started to be passed. The federal, well, we're going to get into the federal laws, and you can see the dates that they were passed to try to regulate what was going on in the industry. Okay, so what do you think is the idea behind a situation where I'm looking at the chat here. Dan says, what is an example of a solicited sell? Great question. Solicited sell orders are not impacted. Dan, you know what? I don't have. I'm not going to fudge it. I don't know that where that came from on there. I just or what it means. I didn't write the this slide or create the slide. Solicit sell. Do you have an idea what it might be?
No, actually I don't. That's why I'm questioning it. I can look at. I mean, I'll look it up. I was just wondering if you had an example, but that's fine.
Yeah. No, what would a solicited seller?
You know, I've been in the business for ages, and there's a lot of stuff I don't know or remember. So.
Yeah. You know, for those that are not in the business, you know, a lot of times on buys and sells, we have to check off the fact that did we solicit it, or was it unsolicited? Did the client call us and say, hey, I want to buy this particular stock, or did I pick up the phone and call the client and say, hey, I want you to buy this particular stock? So they want to know when the trade is done, was it solicited or unsolicited? So solicited sales are not impacted by state law. Don't know anything about that. Yeah, please, Dan, if you find it, let me know. Otherwise, I will write myself a note and ask the author of that one where he was coming from on that one. Okay, let me get my solicited sale. All right. What else can I say about this? That's about it for the state registration. So, hey, here's the bottom line. If you have a test question and they ask about what regulation is being enacted here or is being described here, or what federal regulation, blah, 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 and one of the answers happens they have the term in there, blue sky, you might want to eliminate that one, because blue sky always refers to the state. We have to take series license number 63 to be able to sell securities, buy and sell securities in the state of Illinois, and in all the states they have a series 63 license that you have to get. Some people don't get the 63, they get a 66, and a 66 is the blue skies incorporated with the registered investment advisor type of an exam that someone has to take, and they get a 66 at that point. If I was a registered investment advisor, I would have to get normally a 65. But if I want to be able to sell securities, buy and sell securities, I have to have blue sky, which would be a 63. So instead of just taking a 65 and a 63 and a Series 7 as an example to do some buying and selling of securities, I would say I'm going to bypass the 63 license, take a license called the 66, and the 66 will cover both 65 and 63. Did I confuse you? Hope it not. Don't lose any sleep over it. Okay? All right, let's move on. So now we get into some of the federal regulations. How deep are we going to get into it? Not real deep. Let's see if we can come up with a word or two or a phrase that might help you remember what the Securities Act was supposed to be. They're not asking you to go out to the library or to download the actual Securities Act of 33 and read it. I don't know too many people who ever read that. You let the compliance people worry about that type of stuff. For those that are in the business to, the IPO people who are, and the lawyers that are putting all together all the prospectuses and the paperwork to bring a new issue to the marketplace, they have to be concerned about Securities Act of 33, because notice what it says here. It establishes rules for new issues for the Securities Act of 33. So one of the words that I learned, or the phrases that was used in the Series 7 exam by the instructor, was Securities Act of 33 is the Paper Act. P-A-P-E-R, the Paper Act. Okay, so let's kind of just write that down, that this one was the Paper Act. Securities Act of 34 was the People Act. Now take a look at what's being stated here under 34. And there we go. On the Securities Act of 34, they created the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The Securities and Exchange Commission is in charge of FINRA. And FINRA is the testing body for broker-dealers and registered reps and all that stuff. So, and they're the ones that will govern what's going on and make sure that everybody's in compliance and things of that nature. All right, so the bottom line is two things. Number one, as you can see, these two securities were written in 1933 and 1934, right after the Depression, and it was the federal the federal government saying, hey, we got to get involved in the Federal Reserve, as a whole. Hey, we got to get involved and protect the public. We have to and do our best to assure them that the stocks that are being sold, these very securities that are coming to the marketplace, are following certain rules and regulations going forward. Okay, so Securities Act of 33, Paper Act, another important one associated with the Act of 33 would be the anti-fraud provisions. So that's about as deep, were created from this particular act. So you want to make sure that when we get off this section on regulations, that you could say, I know something about the 33 and the 34 going forward, okay? Let's move on to the next one. Investment Company Act of 1940. Again, not too far since the Depression. The Investment Company Act of 40 was put into play, and what is that all about? Well, it's sometimes these regulations give you a hint in the name. Okay, so what is the name? What is the one that you should be concerned with here? Investment companies. Well, who are investment companies? Mutual funds are investment companies. Open-end funds, mutual funds, are regulated by this. Closed-end funds, unit investment trusts, those are investment companies. Okay, they have to follow the rules that are written under the Investment Company Act of 1940. Again, there's an awful lot of rules that they have to follow. I think you just have to be aware of that there are rules out there governing those particular types of companies. Okay. There's an act that's not on the sheet that was written before 1940, and it was the public holding. I'm just going to write this down for you, and you could just be aware, because I picked this up out of the book. The Public Holding Act of 1935. And, well, actually, let's backtrack for a second. That Public Holding Act is located on this next slide, right there on the top of page 16-2. Okay, the one that I just noticed that as I was writing my notes, the one that's not on here is the Trust Indenture Act of 1939. Okay, so I don't know why they weren't put in order. Okay, but this Public Holding Company Act of 1935, as you can see right here, is just, again, a regulation standardizing all the accounting procedures, reporting procedures, and the various types of debt constraints for utility companies. Someone had to regulate them. They stepped in and said, okay, we're regulating you. You only can have so much debt, and you've got to make sure you report the value. Because a lot of people like the utility companies because of the dividends that are paid. All right? So I'm going to go back to that previous page that I started writing this one about the Public Holding Act of 1935, and indicate in here that it's the Trust Indenture Act. And if you ask me what it was all about, I have no idea. Okay? And since it's not on here, we're not going to worry about it, but it was in print somewhere that there was another act written in 1939. So just add that to your fuel, but I wouldn't worry about sleeping on it and going forward at this point. I told you about the Investment Company Act of 40, and I did mention to you that sometimes in the actual description of the act or the title of the act, they tell you what it's supposed to govern or who it's supposed to govern. Well, this one is governing investment advisors. Now, maybe you covered that in your insurance course. I don't know. They used to always cover and talk about the Investment Advisor Act, especially when they got into the ABCs of the RIA. I want to ask you a question. Just give me a yes or no on this, if you would. Did you guys... Okay, where's my clear button? I don't know where the clear button is. Did you guys have a ABC approach to the RIA, that you had to be give advice, being in the business to give advice? The B is for being in the business, and C is for compensation. Did you cover that in your insurance course? How about a green check that you did? Or something of that nature. All right. So Valerie says it was in her course. And some of you did not take the class. Okay. But that's the bottom line. Under the Investment Advisors Act, it governs those that are under the RIAs, those that are considered registered investment advisors. They have to follow the Anti-Fraud Act, that was written for the Securities Act of 33. Okay. They must have disclosures, and they use Form ADV out there. They have to do a whole bunch of record-keeping requirements, so on and so forth. But they have to follow the three-pronged test to determine if they should register as an investment advisor, and we refer to it as the ABCs. That's simple, right? And the A is for the giving advice. B is being in the business to do so, and C is compensation. And this compensation does not matter whether it's, it could be commissions or it could be fees. Commissions or fees will count for compensation. So that's the Investment Advisors Act. And one of the things I think I would draw from this, who's got to register with the SEC? Anybody that is doing greater than or equal to $100 million under management. If you have over $100 million or more of assets under management, then you are to be registered with the SEC. If you are under that $100 million, you register with the state. At one time, it used to be a $25 million mark that you had if you were above 25 million, or actually it was more like above 30 million. But if you're under 25 million, you're with the state. 25 to 30 million, you had to start getting ready to start filing with the SEC. And I guess they found out that there's too many people that are doing these types of things. SEC was never going to be able to monitor and watch what's going on with those firms. So the rules got changed, and they said, hey, SEC is going to only cover those that are 100 million or more. State, you take care of everybody that's under that. All right. So those are your takeaways going forth. All right. Moving right along. I already mentioned to you about the public holding companies at 35. How about this SIPC, the Securities Investors Protectors Act of 1970? The change that occurred, they amended it, and the bottom line was that the part that was amended, it's still the $500,000 per customer. That has not changed. It's the amount of cash that was increased. In other words, SIPC covers $500,000 for the client's account. It's only going to be paid out if the company went belly up, primarily. Look at that first bullet point. It's protection for missing securities and or cash owed in the event of a failure of a brokerage firm. So the firm has to go belly up, and then if you happen to have an account with that particular firm, if you had a brokerage account, they would cover Well, first of all, they will try to find your securities and get them back to you. And if there was cash, they can get their hands on the cash. They'll give you back the cash that you had in your account. The amount of cash that you'd be insured for is $250,000. If you had $500,000 in your account, all in cash, they would only cover $250,000 of it. So the limit on the cash portion of that $500,000 total, got it? There's a $500,000 total insurance policy for the brokerage account. Each individual brokerage account will have that $500,000 upper limit. No more than $250,000 is part of that $500,000. So here's a question for you. Tell me if you can answer it. If you had $200,000, you might want to write this down real quick for yourself on a little piece of paper. If you had $200,000 in equities, $100,000 in a money market fund, $100,000 in individual bonds, and $200,000 in cash, how much are you going to be covered for? The brokerage firm goes belly up. How much are you going to be covered for? Anybody want to tell me? All right, so Dan says $500,000. Dan, tell me which of the 600 that I gave you, which ones are covered?
The cash, 200 cash, 50,000 in the money market, because I'm assuming that's a cash equivalent.
Okay, glad you said that. The money market fund is a cash equivalent, but it's considered a security.
Okay.
Okay, so the bottom line is you would have, I guess the way they would look at it would be you have a $500,000 total coverage, of which $200,000 will be your equities. Let's cover that. $100,000 your money market, that's $300. $100,000 your bond, that's $400, and only $100,000 of the cash. If they turn around and says, well, wait, here's your $200,000 in cash and your $100,000 in bonds and your $200,000 in equities, then they would not cover your money market fund because they can't cover more than $500,000. So I don't know if their combination, if they would, what takes priority in that payout, whether it's cash over equities or whatever. But the bottom line is just remember, it's $500,000 total. No more than $250,000 of it could be cash. That's how you have to look at it. And then the point I really wanted to stress was that a money market fund is considered a security. It is not considered cash. A lot of people will think money market funds are cash, and it is not. Okay? All right. Let's move on. Insider Trading Act of 84, amended in 88. You could read all the different things about this. Again, I don't want to belabor and read you every slide, but I think the key to this is making sure you understand what's an insider. You know, I got written down here, insiders are defined as directors, officers, major shareholders, bankers, investment bankers, accountants, or attorneys of a firm could be considered insiders. And then in parentheses, they said, or anyone who obtains non-public information. So that, in parentheses, anyone who obtains non-public information kind of opens the door for anybody in that particular firm. Well, here's the bottom line, the way I understand insider. Hey, if somebody has access to information, private information about that particular firm, or about something that's going on in that particular firm, and then they either use it to their benefit or they share it with somebody else and tell them to go and either buy the stock or sell the stock or whatever the case may be, that person is considered using insider information. That's illegal. So anybody who takes information that is not known to the public in general and then they use it to their benefit, could get zapped on the Insider Trading Act, and a lot of problems could take place. A lot of fines, maybe go to prison, the whole 9 yards. Okay, so that's, if I was a tester for the CFP board and I wanted to test on something in regulations, that wouldn't be a bad one to throw out to you. Make sure, because insider information is always, hey, look what happened to, who was it? That woman that blonde hair, who
Martha Stewart.
There you go, Martha Stewart. And I can't imagine her doing anything. Is she really watching her stock portfolio and all that stuff? And but you know what? It was whatever trade was done. She said, "Go ahead and do it." Did they say why they're doing it? But somehow she got zapped on that. So it's they'll go after you one way or another. All right, that's the Insider Trading Act. Let's move on. I think there's 11 federal regulations that you have to be familiar with, not counting the one that I threw in there, that 1939 one. SEC Fair Disclosure Act, written back in October 2000. You all know what this is all about, don't you? In the old days, and Dan, maybe you can remember this, in the old days, didn't the big wirehouses and their big to-dos in those wirehouses like to wine and dine all the chief financial officers of these big companies, get them a big weekend somewhere, fly them out, taking golfing, feeding them, the whole 9 yards, have a couple drinks and talk about things. How's the company going?
Yeah, it's true. And there was one firm that used to advertise how they were allowed to look at their books. I think probably around 2000.
Okay. So those things happened out there. And, so then the guys that come back to work on Monday had some had some information about what was going on there, and then they would tell their people, and they make their trades and be ahead of the game. And, eventually they said, hey, we can't have that happen anymore. So supposedly this doesn't go on anymore. That I guess I would assume there's something going on in this world, but who am I to know all of the inside things that are going on? But the bottom line is no one is supposed to do this stuff. No one is supposed to be able to go out there and be able to get access to information that other people can. So what this act is saying is that if you represent a big company, the chief financial officer or somebody in that firm, and you are going to disseminate some information, you have to make sure that it's available to anybody and everybody. Okay? So, especially if what you're going to say can move the market or can move that particular security up or down. So, they want the release of information to be done in a public way. Everybody should know about it. Now you might say, well, how's everybody going to know about it? Well, those that are watching will know about it. And that's all there is to it. If they've said, hey, at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, so-and-so is going to discuss the State of the Union with this particular company, people are going to be listening that are doing the research on that particular company or that are following that particular company. Okay? That's that part. How about the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, also known as the SOX, S-O-X, the SOX Act. Okay, nothing to do with Chicago White Sox. But the idea behind this particular act was, there was, if we can recall, all the things that took place out there with bad accounting going on and misinformation being presented, so on and so forth. And they said, hey, we've got to get some people into those big companies. And so they created a public accounting oversight board. Okay, and they wrote up the rules, and they requires independence of corporate boards. In other words, they said, hey, Anybody who represents a company, like this one here about the CEOs and CFOs, that whatever they're presenting out there, they got to write their name on there and certify that the results are correct. And if the information was fudged with and they find out, then these CEOs and CFOs are going to go to jail, pay some fines and go to jail. Okay, so they working our way down the bullet points. They established a lot of stricter rules. They've established all these different firewall rules. They've actually put these independent auditors in the building of the home office where all this stuff is being done, and they sit in a room and they just crunch numbers left and right. I remember going, I don't know if I was in Dallas or I was in Phoenix or somewhere on a due diligence kind of a meeting with one of the non-traded REIT firms or whatever, and they were taking us on a tour. They had like 4 floors of this particular building was their company. And we get into the, let's say the 3rd floor, and we get off the elevator, and they said, see that over there to the left, all those offices there? There are people from this Sarbanes-Oxley Act in there 24 hours a day crunching the numbers of this firm. We can't go in there. You're not allowed in there. Nobody's allowed in there. But they're crunching numbers. We went to the right. Interesting and costly because someone's paying for all that stuff. But the bottom line is they're saying, hey, the numbers that are out there need to be correct for everybody. So that's the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And U.S. Patriot Act, written back in 2001, right after what took place, and it was amended in 2006. 9/11 brought this on, and what they were concerned with is about terrorists and the fact of all this anti-money laundering that's going on. And they say in these firms, you better have a lot of different things in place. Make sure on this customer identification program, every time I get a new client, I got to say, I need a copy of your driver's license. They have it on file. Need a picture of you. I need to verify who you are, because we all know that what takes place is that some of these organizations, terrorist organizations, will have someone here, planted here 20 years before they are to do their next thing out there, and they become part of the neighborhood. But they need to be funded because they're making so much money. They need to get some more money, so on and so forth. So they would send them over some cash or whatever, and they'd put them in an account, and they're saying, hey, they're opening accounts in 9 different brokerage firms. Well, they're trying to pool all that information together to be able to watch those that they want to watch. So that's what's happening. All right, so be familiar with the regulations of the U.S. Patriot Act, in regards to what you see on the screen is probably enough, but be aware of that stuff. And then this particular act, the Dodd-Frank Wall Act, there were a couple hundred different, I think, points to this, and I don't know where we are today. I think those that are in the business say, well, they probably have enacted 85 or 90 of the 200 things that were out there. But the intent behind it is just, again, to increase the reform. After we have certain things that occur in the marketplace, like especially what happened in 2008, they figured they had to reform and protect the consumer a little bit more. And so Dodd and Frank, these 2 different individuals, and that's why they call it the Dodd-Frank Act, put some of these bullet points out there and said, hey, go to work. Let's try to clean it up a little bit more. So it's helping, but it's being revised again and again. And that's about it on those regulations. So this was the 11th of the federal regulations. Make sure you have a taste of some of them, okay? This particular part here on the SEC, just to let you know that the SEC, this is on page 19-1 of your handout there. They have 3 major functions that they're involved with. The first one being the executive function. As you can see, then there's your legislation and your judicial functions. They give you a couple bullet points underneath of what they do, and just be familiar with it. All right, so think about it. Remember I mentioned on Monday, here you got the CFPEC board, there's going to be 180, 85 questions in your comp exam, and if they ask anywhere from 35 to 45 questions in investments, and they're testing you for your competency in the area of financial planning in general, do you think they're going to be testing you on ethics? Yep. Do you think they're going to be testing you on the rules and regulations that they want you to follow as a CFP board? Yep. Do you think they're going to be asking you, should you be familiar with state and federal regulations as it pertains to whether it's investing or taxes or whatever, estate planning rules? And yep. So there's always going to be rules that you have to follow and things you need to be aware of. So you've got to probably believe there's going to be a question somewhere in there on this regulation stuff. Okay, so that's about the extent of that. Let's move on. Last but not least, last page. No, here's FINRA. I always had trouble trying to remember what did FINRA stand for. It's the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA. Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, established in 2007. It used to be the NASD. Now they call it the FINRA. Okay, because the National Association of Security Dealers, NASD, had rules and regs that they were enforcing. The New York Stock Exchange had regulatory type of functions also. And they said, who are we supposed to follow? The New York Stock Exchange regulatory rules and regs, or do you follow the NASD rules? They said, you know what, let's kind of combine those regulatory groups together, and we'll create it and call it FINRA. And FINRA then turns around and regulates what's going on in the industry in regards to the people that are involved. I mentioned to you on Monday, I think we heard Dan say he was Series 3 licensed. Dan, let's see, can you tell me again what your licenses are?
I have a 7, a 66, and because I'm a commodity, well, I was a commodities broker via a seat on the floor, so I have a Series 3. I'm kind of grandfathered in. I didn't have to take the test, but I effectively have a 3.
Okay. So now, if you were a Series 7 licensed individual, that means you can buy and sell stocks, bonds, you could do options, you could do currency. You cannot do commodities. You had to be Series 3 to be able to do the commodity stuff. So some people are licensed as in Series 6. Well, if you're a Series 6, all you can do is mutual funds. Or, you know, that the Investment Company Act of 1940, open-end, closed-end, and UITs. All right. If you have a Series 6, you can do the open-end, you can do the UITs and things of that nature. But you can't buy and sell and trade stocks. You have to have 7 for that. I had a 6, and then I got to 7. And so I said, why did I take the 6? Because the person or the group, I was under an insurance group back in 1978, and they said, okay, you know, you want to sell some stuff, all right, you get to go out and get your Series 6. And naive as I was, I went out and got my Series 6. Then I heard about the 7. I said, what's the 7? They said, well, that expands your horizons a little bit, and the reason we didn't tell you about the 7 is because if you took the 7, you'd probably leave us, because, you know, you could do more things out there, and we only were limited to doing mutual funds and variable annuities and things of that nature. And so 3 months later, I took the Series 7, passed the Series 7, and I did leave. So they probably knew what would possibly happen, because, you know, you didn't want to be, you know, I didn't want to have limitations. I wanted to have the ability to do more for my clients. I also am Series 24, which means I can supervise people. I've got 4 or 5 reps now, and I am in compliance for our broker-dealers, so I have to monitor what they do and make sure they're following all the rules and regulations. I do have my Series 63 for the blue sky. I did not have to do a 65 or 66 because I'm a CFP, and if as a CFP, I could be a registered investment advisor without taking the 65. Okay, because they said either you have a 65 or be a CFP, and you could be a registered investment advisor So I could be that without having the 65. I mentioned to you earlier about the 66, and that 66 is the combination of 65 and 63 together. That's all. So should you be aware of these particular licenses and what they can and cannot do? Probably not. I mean, I don't think you have to really write them down and memorize who can do what. But here's the point. If you want to sell something or buy something for a client and earn a commission, you have to be licensed. If you want to earn a fee, you have to be under a registered investment advisor. Either be your own registered investment advisor or be what they call an investment advisor representative under an RIA firm. Then you can charge a fee. But if you are not under a registered investment advisory firm, or you are not your own registered investment advisory, okay, you cannot charge a fee. So if you have a Series 7, you can't say, oh, write me a check for $200 for all my time I spent with you. Can't do that. You have to follow the rules and regulations of the RA world to charge a fee for your time for taking assets under management. Flat fee, hourly fee under the RA world. Commissions in the other areas. Okay, that's how that works. All right, so be familiar about FINRA in general and the regulations. This particular slide just kind of says, remember all that disclosure that had to take place in the SEC, the Securities Act of 33, that was the Paper Act. They kind of said, hey, every year we want the company to do an annual filing. They call that a 10K report, and that's the annual filing. If they said it was a quarterly filing, it's called an 8K. Excuse me, sorry. 10Q is the quarterly filing. The 8K is saying, hey, if there were some changes that took place, you got 15 days to let the SEC know about it. If it was a material event, some type of a change that took place, and it could affect the security's value, you better let them know within 15 days of that event taking place. If you don't, big fines, folks. So that's the 8K report. So I'm sure there are people who are monitoring companies and whether or not they're doing, filing these 8Ks if there are some significant changes. So 8K is the significant changes, 15 days to get it done. 10K annual, 10Q quarterly. Then what's the other stuff here? 13D is required filing. Okay, that's for the, if somebody in the firm has access to being able to buy 10% of the stock of that particular firm, then they have to file a 13D report for that type of stuff. So be familiar, with some of these disclosure requirements. Why is foreign securities in this particular assignment? And the answer is I don't know why. Because it happened to be probably in the assignment or in that chapter that and so the author of this packet says, all right, let's put something about foreign securities. Foreign securities, it's interesting. In the old days of this textbook, there used to be a whole chapter that dealt with foreign securities. There is not a chapter on foreign securities in your book. What you're going to find would be interspersed throughout the whole book different points about international investing. They'll talk about ADRs. They'll talk about diversification and having foreign securities in your portfolios, so on and so forth. So I'm not blowing this particular page off. I think you should do your best to become familiar with the. Let's see. I'm trying to get my thing to work here. All right. So you should learn about, are there advantages associated with investing in foreign securities? And they give you kind of 4 or 5 bullet points. Are there disadvantages to investing in foreign securities? Yeah. Get to know them. Are there terms specific to foreign securities? And the answer is yeah, ADRs. So find in your book about the ADRs. Make sure you know how ADRs work. Okay, that type of information is in there. And in the Mayo 11th edition, ADRs can be found on pages 36 and page 365. And that type of information should be enough to give you what you should know about an ADR, the American Depository Receipt. You know, there's either sponsored or unsponsored ADRs that are out there. What's the difference? The part on the global funds, the second bullet point under terms, pages 251 to 252 talk about global funds in the United States. The EFI index is on page 245 of your text. Foreign debt is on page 552. Currency futures is on page 726. Currency swaps on page 726. Okay? So, but foreign securities in general, in the assignment that you had to read for today's class, or Monday's class, was on pages 36 and 37, dealt with foreign securities in general. All right, so the point is, it's spread out across in your book. Make sure you're comfortable with the understanding of there are advantages and disadvantages to investing in foreign securities and certain terms associated with it. All right, let's move off of this, get into the actual assignment for tonight. I've got 6:25, and we're going to be done by about 8 o'clock, so I'm going to give you guys a chance to take a 5-minute break right now. Go stretch your legs, go get something to drink, come on back, and we'll start on assignment number 2. Okay, and we'll take it from there. All right, see you in 5 minutes. I've got 6:25, so I'll start talking at 6:30. Okay, everybody, I'm back. Are you back? How about a green check? You can all hear me all right? Good, good, good. All right. Let's kind of get ourselves rolling here. As you can see on the screen, packet number 2 deals with time value of money, financial planning, taxation, and the efficiency of financial markets. Okay. What we're going to do is jump over to, I'm going to do the time value at the end. I'm going to leave 45 minutes to do the time value part of it, because I believe some of you might need to work on that area. Let me ask you a question, just so I have an idea. First of all, I wish I could find out where my button is to clear yourself. Let's use if you are real comfortable with time value of money calculations, give me a smiley face. Smiley face if you're really happy and comfortable with time value. All right. No smiley faces. How about if you are looking forward to working on this time value of money calculations, give me a green check. Okay, so then we'll make sure we spend, maybe we get there even faster than 45 minutes, because it's very important. You've got to know time value. You sure don't want to blow that one off on a test, because it's not that, it should not be that difficult. So what I want you to do is jump to page 9-1 of packet number 2. And let's start right with that stuff. All right, so the 6 steps in investment planning. If I can recall, if you were in that CFP1 course, you learned the 6 steps of financial planning. Okay, and the 6 steps of financial planning was the word mirage spelled backwards. MIRAGE. So maybe they taught you EGARM in the CFP1 course. So what does all that stand for? And let's kind of compare the financial planning process to the 6 steps in investment planning, and you're going to see that basically it's exactly the same. When you're working with a client, you need to establish a client relationship. You need a working relationship. You need to establish, talk with them about, find out what their goals and objectives are, and be able to find, ask them, what are they looking for, blah, 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 and then whether or not you can do it for them, and blah, 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 blah. And after X amount of time, you determine, yeah, we should be able to work together. And that they're willing to pay you for your time, whether it's a flat fee or if they say, hey, I'll pay you based on whatever you take as assets under management and you're going to earn commissions, that's going to be your pay. Maybe it's going to be fees by assets under management, that's what you're going to get paid. Some people say, hey, no, if we're going to do a financial plan, I want to get paid as a financial planner doing a financial plan, and then if you choose to work with me in the investment area, that's separate, and that'll be going forward, and I will earn something based on time spent or commissions earned or fees for assets under management. So you got to establish the working relationship, put it out front, work it out with the client, make sure they're aware of it, and then if you say, hey, we're working together, you've just completed step number 1. Step number 2 says you got to gather the client data and information. What is the data and information you're going to collect? Well, if we jump over to the next slide, and we'll come back to this slide number 9.1, but on slide number 9.2, before we jump into the gathering of the data, you see this first bullet point up here about specifying investment goals? You all remember in your in the CFP1 class, if you had that class, and if you didn't, you got to know that a goal right here has 3 specific things associated with in regards to what you should find in a particular goal. You should have, probably the starting point would be a purpose for that particular. What is the reason for the goal? What is the goal? What's the objective? Okay. A time frame associated with when we're going to try to accomplish that, and the dollars that are being used, either required to reach that goal or what is going to be used, going forward to invest into that particular time frame and that goal, so on and so forth. So bottom line, 3 parts to a goal, right? Purpose, dollar amount, time frame, doesn't matter what orders, and we could see the various examples of what you're going to be, and we talked about that on Monday, the different type of goals or objectives that they might have. All right. This other part here about life cycle hypothesis and all that type of stuff, in packet number 10, they get into showing you a chart that looks something, they try to depict the accumulation phase in regards to a time frame. When does the accumulation phase take place? When do you start to consolidate what's going on in your life in regards to financial assets? What's your spending that takes place for whatever reasons? And are you ever going to deplete all your assets, or are you going to gift it away, or what are you going to do at the end? What does life cycle hypothesis mean? It means a lot to different people, different ways of viewing it. But the bottom line is, everybody that you're going to be working with, even if they're all the same age, all have different goals and objectives, all have different circumstances. And what are the circumstances we're talking about, and what's the differences is that next slide, which would be, what's that, 10.1? Yeah, 10.1. The individual financial statements, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, those are most probably, in my opinion, the most important items you have to have from your client. How many people can tell you what their balance sheet looks like? How many people have a cash flow statement that can show you their inflows and their outflows. That's and if you're in that CFP1 course, you had to do that type of stuff. You had to be able to create those particular balance sheets and cash flow statements and things of that nature. Let's go back to that first page here on 9-1, and step number 2 says you got to be able to gather client data information. Well, there's quantitative data, which is numbers, and qualitative data, which is opinions and feelings and just general type information. That's name, address, birth date, social security number, that type of qualitative information. When do you want to retire? What are you thinking about retiring? What's your goals toward retirement? Who's your, in estate planning, you're going to get in there and discussion of, do you have a will or powers of attorney or any type of a trust? You want to get to know your client. So that's your qualitative information. And then you want to get the quantitative information and look at their policies and insurance and look at the retirement plan that they might have and things of that nature. So the stuff on gathering client data, cash flow statement, and balance sheet. So let me jump back over to that page on balance sheet and all that. Can somebody remember what goes on a balance sheet? This balance sheet, what are your major categories? Assets on the left-hand side, and liabilities on the right-hand side, and net worth is assets minus liabilities equals net worth, right? So assets minus liabilities equals your net worth. On your assets, how do you break down assets? You've got your there are 3 different categories, weren't there, on assets? Does anybody want to either type it down for me on the chat or tell me over the with your microphone what are the assets that they're referring to? How do you break down those categories? Okay, Heather, can you, all right, I'm looking under. I got short term. What else you got? Long term? Okay. All right, so cash and cash equivalents, I believe is what you're telling me is the short term. And then you got your invested assets, which would be this one in the middle, and the one on the bottom would be your use assets. Okay, cash and cash equivalents, anything that's in nature, your short-term stuff, your savings accounts, your credit union accounts, your bank accounts, your money market accounts, short-term, anything under 1 year's worth of time in regards to full liquidity and really having access to that type of money in a fast manner. Highly marketable type of stuff there. Invested assets was your stuff like your 401k plan money, long-term money for retirement, could be college money that you're saving for, 15 years from now, so on and so forth. Use assets, the last one on the left-hand side, fair market value of your home, value of your cars, personal property, things of that nature. All right, so those are your assets. What's over on the liability side? Short-term liabilities, long-term liabilities. What's considered short-term liabilities? It could be credit card debt. You could have student loans over there. You could have your mortgage over there. And you could break it down in the short-term and long-term, or just the fact that debt is debt. And then you take your assets, total them up, take your liabilities, total them up, assets minus liabilities equals your net worth. Okay, so don't forget that. Again, if you're going to be tested on a comp exam, they're going to ask you, can you put one of these together? Or they're going to ask you, can you analyze it properly, so on and so forth. On the cash budget, you got a cash flow statement. Wait, isn't this balance sheet one of the key things in the balance sheet? It's a point in time, right now, this particular point in time. Whereas on a cash flow statement, it's a period, maybe for a full year, January 1st through December 31st. This is the cash flow. And what are the categories under here? The first thing they talk about is, you got your income from all different sources for that particular year, whether it's gross or net. I don't care how you determine how you're going to put it together with your client. And after you have your income, so then you have your outflows. And how many categories are there under outflows? I remember they used to teach the following under outflows. You had savings and investments, pay yourself first as one area. Then you had your fixed outflows, I call it FO for fixed outflows, and then you had your variable outflows. What went under fixed outflows? Anything you were obligated to pay, and under variable was anything that you had choice over, whether you wanted to have it or not. I don't have to take a vacation, but if I did, I'd put it under variable. But I do have to pay my gas bill and my electric bill. That's under fixed. So total inflows minus all these different outflows. Do you have any discretionary money left at the end? So again, those are those financial statements. Man, you got to have those two to be able to work out an investment plan for your client too. I would say that if 10 people came in my office, I would say, do you have a balance sheet and a cash flow statement? Probably 9 of them did not. And I would work with them to help put one of these together so I could come up with something. Pro forma is, as we know, it's just a budget going forward down the road. All right. So going back to this 6 steps in investment planning. Establish that working relationship, set the goals, gather all your data, and then what should you do after you gather the data? Well, it makes sense. Analyze it. That's what you're getting paid for. You're going to analyze that data. And then after you analyze all the data, then you're going to develop some type of a plan. Then you're going to present that plan and maybe implement if they hire you to do so. And then after you're done with all that stuff, then you're going to do an ongoing job of monitoring it. For what? The progress of, are you reaching your goals? Included in this, probably you're going to have a investment policy statement type of thing. Who's going to do what? Who's got tasks? What assigned tasks are for the investor? What are the assigned tasks that you're going to complete? So on and so forth. You're going to monitor and eventually update the goals at least annually. You should be talking with them, if not more so. And why would you want to meet with them and monitor what's going on? Because there are changes in the laws that occur. There are circumstances that are related to their jobs and their, what's happening in their family that could cause things to change on the investment plan going forward. So the bottom line is, and think about this for your comp. I was talking to a guy today who I had in class a number of years ago, and he had to take his comp exam, and he passed it, and he was very excited about having passed it way back then. But when I say, he was in my class many years ago, did not take the comp exam, or took it once and then passed it or whatever, and then about 10 or 12 years later, after being in the business, went back to take the comp exam, and he passed it, and he's so excited about it. What did he tell me about the comp exam today? Today, I'm talking about May 14th, 2014. He says, there was a difference in the comp that I just took compared to what it was 10, 12, 14 years ago when he was in class with me. He says the comp today was more solution-based. It was, here's a situation. What solution would you recommend? Here's their situation. How would you handle it in regards to estate planning? What technique would be appropriate? Or what investments would be appropriate? How would you build a diversified portfolio based on what they're looking for, so on and so forth? So he used the terms, hey, it seemed like it was such a solution-based type of an exam and process. He used the word process. You need to know the process to get there. You need to know the keystrokes to get there on calculations. You need to know, what they're trying to ask you to understand and to be able to get back to them in regards to an answer in regards to risk. He says, and he said, solution and process are 2 key terms that he would use to describe the comp exam. That was interesting. He was not aware of the change that took place going forward. He wasn't aware that the new comp exam starting in November is going to be only a one-day test, 6 hours. His first concern was, is that going to water it down? And I said, no, it's not supposed to. He said, it'll be interesting to see how it's perceived out there. Are they trying to make it easier for people to pass their comp exam? According to the CFP board, they will test you. They feel that what they test you on will be enough to show whether you're competent enough to get the CFP. Because we do know that passing the exam is just the one part of it. You had to take an approved program, and number two, you have to write a comprehensive plan in that last class or that last part of your CFP program, and have that approved by a committee. And now you show us that you have the other knowledge on the final exam, and it's solution-based, competency-based solution to situations, to problems. Okay, so that's enough of that stuff. 6 steps in investment planning, same type of 6 steps in financial planning. We already were on this particular slide, which is on 9-2. We already talked a little bit about the goals. You know that there's 3 parts to it, and at the bottom of this particular slide, you can see analysis of resources. You know, you look at your current and future resources that are available. You know, this is you're analyzing your balance sheet and your cash flow is what is being said down here on the bottom. You know, current and future resources that are available. That's from, you know, what's the investments that are out there, what's their current position. You know, try to establish a financial plan going forward. You know, blah blah blah. Enough of that stuff. Let's move on. That next page, we already kind of alluded to the stuff on balance sheet and cash flow statement, flexible investment plans. It's kind of reiterating itself, right? You have to have flexible investment plans because of what? Changing conditions that occur, changing goals that occur with your client. You only get that from when you're monitoring the situation, monitoring and dealing with your clients and reviewing what's going on, and you're going to find out about those things. And this is the rest of the slide is saying the same thing. Let's move on. Asset allocation. Monday we talked about asset allocation and diversification. So here they're kind of restating it again. Asset allocation is a process. This is covered on page, I think, 99 of your textbook. It's a process of determining what proportions of the resources should be invested in the various asset classes. Remember the asset classes. They're back in the beginning, when I was taking the CFP program in the early 80s, they talked about 4 major asset categories. You know, I did that with you on Monday. Debt and equities. And the umbrella over that is that those are your traditional investments. Okay? Then draw yourself a little bit of a line, and you got your real estate and your tangibles, or the alternative type investments, hard assets, real assets, whatever your case may be. You know, non-traditional type of investment vehicles that are available. Well, in today's world, you got to have a combination of those things going across if you want to help reduce some of the risk in a portfolio because of how they are correlated, that they don't move in the same direction all the time. When we'll talk about correlation on Monday and Wednesday and covariance and all that stuff on modern portfolio theory. So make sure you do your reading for that assignment before we come in the door on Monday, because it's going to be pretty heavy stuff, a lot of calculations going forward. All right, so this asset allocation is just saying, hey, you know, what are the proportions that are going to go into the various asset classes? They say that a lot of times those proportions are expressed as a percentage. Like, for instance, maybe 60% of your whole portfolio is going to be in equities. Okay, and then maybe within those equities, 60% of those equities will be in domestic and 40% will be international. Well, 40% of 60% is 24% of your whole portfolio is in international equity securities. They're expecting you to be able to understand that type of stuff going forward. And then needing to know how those particular percentages might change depending on the individual's life and financial condition. Okay. I like the bullet point here about retired client. Any mistake with capital is permanent. Whether they relate to, hey, if you're in there and you're 68 years old and you got a portfolio and in 2008 hits and you lose 40% of all your equities because you were predominant in equities, it's going to be, do you have enough time left to be able to recoup all that? Sometimes I say you might be able to recoup it in 1 year or 2 years, and maybe not. Maybe what if it was 10 straight years? Now you're, instead of 68, you're 78. And, maybe the amount of money you needed, you had to draw down on that principal to survive. And that's all. You could say whatever you want about these different bullet points down here. All right, let's move on. Taxation. Very important to get a handle on this part about the taxation associated with investing. Okay, we're on page 11-1. What is taxed? Okay, well, income is taxed, property is taxed, and spending is taxed. Well, how do they tax income? We know how they tax income, right? State tax, federal tax. Those are your primarily ones, federal tax and state tax. You know what rate here in Illinois? We know that we have a flat 5% state tax. In the federal side, it's progressive. Does anybody remember or know what the marginal tax rate categories are in regards to from lowest to highest? Anybody want to take the microphone and tell me what's right down here? What's the lowest tax bracket? Anybody want to run with it? All right, 10. Followed by 15. Jumping up to 25. 28. 33. 35. And the new one, 39.6. Okay, let's break this down a little bit further. When it comes to long-term capital gains, you held your security for more than 1 year. If you were in the 10 or 15% marginal tax bracket, how much do you pay in taxes on a long-term capital gain? The answer is nothing. If you're in a 25, 28, 33, or 35% tax bracket, what do you pay in your long-term capital gains? You're at the 15% tax bracket. And if your taxable estate is over, taxable income is over $400,000, for a single individual, or $450,000 for a married filing jointly, you're in the 39.6% marginal tax bracket, and on your long-term capital gains, you will pay 20%. Okay? So you need to be familiar with that stuff. All right, so I'm looking here. Short-term, do we have anybody? So for short-term, then you pay at your, yes. If it is short-term, thank you. If it is short-term, you pay at the marginal tax bracket. So let me give you an example of a thought on this, right? You got an individual, where's my tax stuff here? You got an individual that's, say a married couple as an example, and they are the 15% marginal tax bracket has a range from $18,151 of taxable income up through, this is for 2014, $73,800. All right, so in theory, you paid 10% on the income up to that 18,151, and anything between those particular areas will be taxed at the 15% rate. Okay, anything above 18,151 will be taxed at 15%. All right, so you have a client, and you have to be discussing them about, you know, their investments and their dividends and interest and all that stuff, and they're sitting at potentially a taxable income of say $78,000. Okay, that means that the difference between the 78,000 and the 7380, in theory, because it's a progressive tax, will be taxed at that 25% tax. So if you could get their stuff into you know, maybe municipal bonds or tax deferred or whatever, and they don't earn that, and you keep them back behind the 73.8, number one, they're only paying 15% on anything in this particular area going this way. But long-term capital gains will be at zero, so if they cash in some investments, they don't have to pay any taxes on it. But anything that's short-term would only be taxed at their marginal tax bracket of 15%, as opposed to, on a short-term basis, taxed at a 25% basis. So does that answer the question? Short-term, then you pay at your own bracket. Yes. Ordinary, you pay at your marginal tax bracket on anything that is considered short-term. So where does it fall in the tax brackets is the key. You should be familiar with the fact that if you own collectibles, the maximum, what's the maximum tax on collectibles would be, and collectibles, I'm going to write it down here, is 28% is the max on collectibles. Meaning what? If you have collectibles and you're in a 15% tax bracket, you only pay 15%. Okay, that's no problem there. But the max tax on collectibles is 28. In other words, if you're in a 33 and you sold some collectibles, you'd only have to pay tax on up to 28% on your gain. If you're in the 39.6, you only have to pay 28% on your collectibles. So collectibles don't fall in that other range of 0, 15, and 20. Collectibles are their own particular area, with the max being 28%. Okay, when you get into your tax course, you're going to go over that type of stuff, but I'm introducing you to the idea of taxation. We know there's income tax, federal and state, and be familiar with, I want to introduce you to the short-term, long-term rates. Property. How do they tax property? Well, if you have real estate, you have real estate taxes. If you have an estate, you pass away, there's estate taxes. That's how they can tax you on there. How about spending? We know that's sales tax. So at what rates? Well, you got regressive, proportionate, and progressive. Okay. Okay, how do I get this out of here? I want to go to this right up here. There we go. All right. Progressive, which is our normal tax bracket for feds. Proportionate, flat taxes like your state of Illinois tax. And regressive. Can somebody tell me or define what this regressive tax is all about? Okay. In terms of individual income and wealth, okay, a regressive tax imposes a greater burden. Here's the key about regressive. It imposes a greater burden relative to resources on the poor than on the rich. There is an inverse relationship between the tax rate and the taxpayer's ability to pay as measured by their assets, their consumption, or their income. So, individual multi-millionaire walks into the liquor store and buys a six-pack of beer, and they pay for that six-pack of beer and whatever taxes have to be paid on it. All right? In walks somebody else that is working at McDonald's, and that's their only income coming in the door. They buy that six-pack. They pay the same amount of money for the six-pack, and they pay the same amount of tax. Does that tax on that six-pack, is it more regressive in terms of who's spending for that six-pack and how it impacts them compared to that multi-millionaire who bought that same six-pack? It's more of a burden on the little guy, as they would say. That's the idea of regressive tax. And sales tax is a regressive tax. They don't care who's buying it. You're still going to pay the same tax. It's not like you show your income card or your net worth card and get a break, or don't get a break. That type of thing. FICA taxes, hey, everybody's paying the same FICA taxes to a point, and excise tax and things of that nature. All right, so that's the idea of regressive. Just be familiar with some of those terms. Moving right along here. Tax shelters. What do we mean by tax shelters? I always thought a tax shelter was one thing, and then I think I've heard, or they are starting to say that you could take all these different ways of either eliminating taxes, reducing taxes, or deferring taxes to a later time period, and kind of call them as a whole a type of a tax shelter. So maybe these are types of tax shelters. And the reason I'm elaborating on that is if you would have said to me in the early 80s a tax shelter, I would have said limited partnerships. You put your money into the limited partnership, say $10,000, and you get a 4-for-1 write-off. In other words, $40,000 you could write off on your income tax by investing into this $10,000 limited partnership. Now, do you think that really happened out there in the early 80s? And the answer is it sure did. And that's why in 1986 the TEFRA was passed. I can't remember what TEFRA stands for. It just said, hey man, we're going to wipe out these limited partnerships because they're abusive. They're taking advantage of the tax system because of some type of a loophole. And people were able to write off $40,000 of taxable of their taxes that they had to pay because they invested 10. So what a great deal! I'll give you 10 to take off 40 on my taxes. I'm already ahead of the game. And so they just said, hey, we're going to wipe that out. So limited partnerships kind of fell off the end of the earth in 1986, and even the good ones that were not abusive got hurt. And that really, really, really did happen, right? So that's why I said if you said to me the words tax shelter, I would have thought of that. Well, now we're going to look at tax shelter in a different way. The tax shelters we're going to look at are the following. Okay, examples. If I said you're going to buy muni bonds, and let's assume they are the proper muni bonds, it gives you interest that falls under what? It's tax-free. Okay? So if I say eliminate some taxes, well, if you bought an investment and the earnings were tax-free, you eliminated paying some taxes. So that could be construed as tax-free, as a type of an elimination. How about you put money in Roth IRAs? Do you know how that works? Well, the money you put into a Roth IRA goes in after tax. In other words, you've taken money, you already pay taxes, take the money out of your pocket and you put it into a Roth IRA. Follow the rules of the Roth IRA, and eventually that money that grew inside that Roth IRA from $10,000 up to $40,000, the earnings was tax deferred. You never had to pay taxes on the earnings while it was growing. And then when you pull it out, again, if you follow the rules and you pull it out at a certain time period that you're allowed to pull it out, you don't pay any taxes on it. So Roth IRAs are pretty good deals out there. People ought to consider them, right? What's a Section 29? So what is a Roth IRA? Let's go back to it. Roth IRA is kind of a deferral of taxes, and then following the rules, you don't have to pay any. Section 529 plans. What happens on a Section 529 plan? Well, if someone's here in the state of Illinois and contributes into it, they get a savings on their state taxes. So they reduce their state taxes by a certain percentage, by a certain dollar amount. And then all the earnings inside that 529 plans are tax deferred. And then if they pull the money out and use it to buy higher education expense, pay for higher education expenses, they don't have to pay any income taxes. So it serves a number of purposes: reduces, defers, and then reduces again or eliminates. You don't have to pay any taxes on it. Realized capital gains, another form of a tax shelter, right? Realized gains. I bought it for $10. See, I bought it for 10 and I sold it for 30. There's a $20 gain. Long-term or short-term? All right, depends on my holding period, right? Did I have to pay any taxes as it was growing? No. So it's kind of like a tax deferral until I realize it. So I realized it. I sold it. The only way you realize something is to sell it. I realized a gain of 20. Then I look back and say long-term or short-term, depending on the holding period. All different parts of this tax sheltering effect. Compared to somebody who has unrealized gains. If you have unrealized gains, nothing is paid. Those are paper profits or losses, right? If it's an unrealized gain, it's a paper gain that unless you sell it, you never realize it. You don't have to. It's tax deferred until you sell it. If you don't sell it, you didn't realize it. So you got the idea. Traditional IRAs on the bottom here. If it's traditional and you qualify, you put money into it and you reduce your income tax for that year. So I have, say I make $50,000 and I put $5,000 into an IRA. I only have to pay income tax on $45,000. I was able to shelter that other $5,000. So I reduced my tax burden. My earnings grow tax deferred. I will get taxed later on when I pull the money out. All right. So each one of these items down here you got to get familiar with in regards to knowing the idea behind: is it deferred? Does it reduce? Does it eliminate? That type of an approach. Okay. So we already talked about that part on the short term. Assets held 1 year or less. That's how it's stated. 1 year or less. Long term, greater than 1 year. And then these different items that are right in here, we already went through that in regards to the percentages based on, like if you're 39.6, you get 20% on your capital gain, so on and so forth. We already went through that type of stuff. All right. What's here on the bottom bullet point, very important that we go through a little exercise on the netting process of capital gains. All right, so get yourself a piece of paper and let's kind of go through that together. All right, you do need to know how to do the netting process of capital gains. So how you do that is the following. Okay. You set it up in the following way. You take short-term gains. Below it, you put short-term losses. To the right side here, you got long-term gains, and you have long-term losses. All right, so let's assume you have $9,000 worth of short-term gains and $6,000 of short-term losses, $16,000, this is all in the same year, of long-term gains, and $18,000 of long-term losses. All right, now you need to do the netting process. So the netting process works like this. You net the short-term gains up against the short-term losses. So this $6,000 loss will offset $6,000 of that gain, so it leaves you with $3,000 of a short-term gain. Then you go over here and net the long-term gains against the long-term losses. You get $16,000 worth of gain will offset part of these losses, leaving you with $2,000 of a long-term loss. Okay. Then you go and net the short-term gains against the long-term losses. I have some. This $2,000 of long-term losses will offset part of these short-term gains, leaving you with $1,000 of short-term gains. Do I have any short-term losses to offset against the long-term gains? The answer is no. So the bottom line is I have a $1,000 short-term gain. That's the netting process. So for that particular year, I will pay taxes based on my marginal tax bracket on the $1,000. Whatever my marginal tax bracket is, that's how much tax will be charged up against the $1,000. Okay?
Tom?
Go ahead.
So just based on this little formula you have, and you know the book or that box makes it a little confusing. All you have to do is put your numbers in here, and whatever it nets out, whether it be on the short-term or long-term side, that's where it goes, plus or minus, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's pretty easy, actually.
Yep. All right, let's do it again. So I'm going to give you another example. All right, so give me a second here to clear my... All right, here we go. Set it up. Short-term gains, short-term losses, long-term gains, long-term losses. All right, so we got, in regards to the situation here, we have $6,000 of short-term gains for that year, and we have $14,000 of short-term losses. We have $19,000 of long-term gains, and we have $15,000 of long-term losses. So now what do you need to do? You need to start with the netting process. 6,000 will offset part of this 14. 6 for the 14 leaves me an $8,000 short-term loss. Net the process over here. Long terms against long terms. This 15 will offset 15 of the long-term gain, leaving you with 4,000 of a long-term gain. Then we go to the crisscrossing. Are there any short-term gains that can offset the long-term losses? The answer is no. We already got that taken care of. How about the short-term losses up against the long-term gains? Oh yeah, we can. We got $4,000 of the gain up against the $8,000 of that short-term loss, leaving me with $4,000 of short-term loss. So, can you write off that full $4,000 of a short-term loss? And the answer is no. Because the rule is, in the calendar year, in your taxable year, the most you can write off is $3,000. So just remember that. The most you can write off is $3,000. So if you write off $3,000, what does that do? That takes the this, right, if you're writing off 3, leaves you with that 1,000 left. You take that 1,000 to the next tax year. So let's assume, whatever, next year, and keep the classification, and you will have already started with a short-term loss of 1,000 in the next tax year. Understand? One last, nothing. Do I need to do another example? What I want you to do is, someone tell me if they think I need to do another example. If you say, do maybe one more, give me a green check. Otherwise, I'll move on. You're pretty good on it? Going once? Going twice? Okay, let's move on. Efficient market, no, before we get to the efficient market hypothesis, in your textbook, probably right around page 102 of your textbook, they have the wash sale. And if I was in your shoes, I'd want to make sure I knew about the wash sale. Very important to know about the wash sale. What the heck is this thing in wash sale? All right, the wash sale are rules that apply only to losses. And it covers a time period of 30 days before and 30 days after the sale. Okay, so if securities, so let's kind of work up an example. If you bought 100 shares at $50 a share, you paid $5,000. And let's assume you bought that on January 1st. I know you won't be able to buy it on January 1st, but let's say you did, of the year 2013. All right? And let's say it was July 1st of 2013, and the share price was down to 20. And you said, I got to get out of here. All right, so you sell 100 shares at $20, which equals $2,000. You're saying to yourself, all right, well, I got a $3,000 loss short term. I could write it off. But you still like that stock. And all of a sudden, on, let's say, August, let's go with July 15th, stock starts to go back. And so you say, man, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to buy 100 shares at $25 a share because it's starting to go back up. So you're spending $2,500 for that stock. Okay, so the stock went back up to 25. You know, and you say, I got to get in there. So you decide to buy, and they're going to say, wash sale. Because wash sale says the following. Wash sale says to you that 30 days prior to July 1st and 30 days after July 1st, if you buy back the stock, I don't care if you bought it on June 15th, at $25 a share because it was down, and then eventually went down to 20, but you bought it at 25, another 100 shares, and they're going to look and say, hey, you were within this 30-day period before the stock was sold or after the stock was sold. We don't care when it was, and you bought the stock back, expecting to make a profit, of course, if it goes up in value. They're going to negate the $3,000 loss. So here's what they're going to do. They're going to say, okay, the new cost basis for your stock. The new cost basis will be the $2,500 plus the $3,000 loss that you thought you were going to take. So your new cost basis is now $5,500. You could still own this particular stock. All right? So you still own a $25 stock. And whatever you do in regards to the holding period, how long are you going to hold it until it keeps going up? Whatever you do, short-term or long-term, this is your cost basis. You will get your loss or gains based on a new starting period after you bought it. Now, they don't penalize you and give you a fine for what just took place. All they're going to do is say you just can't use the loss. New cost basis is add that loss to your new purchase at that new cost basis of the new purchase. That is down to your cost basis going forward, and start the game again. So that's how that works. You need to know about the wash sale. That's all I'm saying. All right. Last but not least, let's talk about the efficient market hypothesis. Okay. And let me backtrack here. There's efficient. We're on page 12-2. And the efficient market hypothesis, it refers, let's see, let me do this here. There we go. All right, let's see. All right, efficient market hypothesis refers to how effectively security prices reflect available information. So think about this, folks. This whole thing on the efficient market hypothesis is in regards to information that's available. It has nothing to do with how quickly an order is executed. I mean, you could pick up the phone and make a trade, and it's done in 5 seconds. That's not efficient. I mean, that is efficient, of course, but it's not what they're talking about in regards to the efficient market hypothesis. The efficient market hypothesis deals with information. Second part, they are saying on this efficient market hypothesis that on a risk-adjusted basis, okay, that is very difficult to beat the market on a risk-adjusted basis consistently. Okay, difficult to beat. So let's see if I can do this. How's that highlighting? Yeah, very important. It's difficult to beat the market on a risk-adjusted basis consistently. That's what it's all about. What's the next bullet? Must examine the risk taken to generate a given return. Simply earning a high return is not the same as beating the market. Okay, assume a large number of diverse participants. Let's look. Okay. Remember on Monday's class, they talked about what makes an efficient market? Well, that's restated. It's restated. Let's see, let me try to get this back in some fashion. Okay. Let's see. You need to have a whole bunch of people. Come on, Tim. Okay. You have to have a lot of people in the marketplace. There's got to be a lot of money played with. There's got to be a lot of information, and there better be some government regulation. That's what makes those four parts make an efficient market. Lots of people, lots of money, lots of information, and government regulations. Now you've got an efficient market if you got all those four components. And then they're saying on the efficient market hypothesis that nobody can, on a risk-adjusted basis, consistently outperform the market. Key is based on the information, not on how quickly you execute. Having said that, they take this efficient market hypothesis and they break it down into three different forms: the weak form, semi-strong form, and the strong form. Someone once said, why don't we just say weakly efficient? W-E-A-K-L-Y. Weakly efficient. Semi-strongly efficient. Semi-strongly, let's just add the letters L-Y, strongly efficient instead of the strong form. Or strongly efficient, to emphasize the idea of the amount of information that is out there and available for people to have to be able to make some decisions going forward. Okay? In your textbook, you really want to look at page 112, and there's a statement made on page 112 about the weakly form or the weakly part of the efficient market hypothesis. So make sure you read that particular statement that's on 112. But here's, in essence, the bottom line on the efficient market hypothesis. They don't believe that doing any type of technical analysis is useful in the efficient market hypothesis. Because what is technical analysis? That's where they use the volume of trading, the share price, the share price changes. So you got share price. They look at all the numbers associated with the price, the historical price of that particular security, the volume of trades that are taking place, the direction it was going in, and each and every day type of thing, and then they analyze it, and they use a lot of different types of charts analyzing that type of data. The efficient market hypothesis says, hey, anything that happened in the past has nothing, and the prices in the past, the volume of trading in the past has nothing to do with the current price of the stock. The current price of the stock reflects all known information. And if we have an efficient market, it is, that means that all the known public information and all the known private information. So if it's strongly efficient, no one's going to have an edge. Right? Well, what if you have a market that's not strongly efficient, it is weakly efficient? Okay? If it's weakly efficient, then they're saying to you that those that do fundamental analysis will have an edge. They will be able to produce potentially better results. Why? Because they have more knowledge about what's being of the companies and the stocks that are being traded. So would you say that here in the United States, our blue chip stocks, our IBMs, our Coca-Colas, our Microsofts, our Exxons, and all these stocks, the information is pretty well known? Sure, every brokerage firm, every wirehouse has a research department watching those and evaluating what's going on with those big companies. And many of the smaller investors are watching it too, and they're using value lining, and they're watching CNBC. And I mean, a lot of information out there. So who's going to have an edge on those big companies? Okay. Well, what about in a country, in one of these emerging markets countries, that there are companies there that not too many people know about? Well, if you have a research department that is located in that region, and they do the homework, and they do the analysis, and they kick the bricks. They talk to the people at the company. They look at the industry in that particular country. They analyze all the ratios about that particular company. They know more about it. If they have that information, they could make a choice, undervalued, overvalued, to buy it, to sell it, whatever. So the fundamental analyst will have an edge at that particular time if it's weakly efficient. But what about if we're not in a weakly efficient marketplace, but we're in a semi-strongly efficient? Then they're saying, well, you know what? If it's semi-strongly efficient, that fundamental analyst information is pretty well known. That's public information. They don't have an edge. We know that technical analysis doesn't work no matter what, and the fundamental analysis group, research department, doesn't have an edge because they don't know any more information than anybody else. They know as much as everybody else, I should say. Well, who has an edge in a semi-strongly efficient? And the answer is the inside information person. Anybody who has inside information would possibly produce superior returns. But we know that insider information, if it's used illegally, is a naughty. No, can't do it, man. But the bottom line is, somebody who knows private information about the particular company could have an edge. Public information is all well known. In a strongly efficient, they're saying, hey, I don't care if you're an insider or an outsider. Public and private information is well known. No one has an edge in a strongly efficient market. So that's the bottom line. Are there different levels of this efficient market hypothesis? The answer is yes. If you're in a situation where it's weakly efficient, they call it the weak form. If it's weakly efficient, not a lot of data, information is well known, then somebody who gets in there and gets that data and that information, the fundamental analysts, they will have an edge. If it's semi-strongly efficient, then all that public information is pretty well known. Nobody has an edge except somebody does lurking in that particular business, and the answer, yeah, the insider would have an edge at that point. But if it's a very strongly efficient marketplace, nobody has an edge. Whether you're insider or outsider public information, all the known information is there. Price reflects for that particular stock is reflected. All the information is reflected in the price of that stock. That's strongly. So, do you believe in that stuff or not? It's up to you. Well, there are what they call market anomalies on the next slide. What the heck's a market anomaly? Market anomaly are occurrences that would not be able to exist if we had a totally efficient marketplace. They should not happen. All right, your job is to know about these different anomalies. Your job is to read about them in your book, because there's a number of them. Here's a list of some of them. Pages 114 and 115 will give you about a paragraph on each one of these. You should know the difference. Just imagine a test question. Here's a situation. What anomaly are they referring to? So they give you the situation, and then they list you 3 or 4 different anomalies, and you'd say, oh, that's the small firm effect. No, that's the January effect. No, that's the value line effect. Great example of the value line effect. Those of you who are in the industry, you've heard of Morningstar. Morningstar gives a star rating to their funds and their various types of investments, variable annuities and ETFs and stuff like that. All right, so do you want to buy a 1-star fund or a 5-star fund? Well, the 5-star fund is your spectacular fund. 1 star is not good. All right? So 5 is good, 1 is not good. Right on value line. If they have a rating, a 1 to 5. Do you want a 5 rating or a 1 rating? And if you didn't know anything about the value line effect, you would say, well, see, if Morningstar is 5-star, then I want a rating of 5 on my stock. Well, no, you don't. You want a 1. 1 is the better one. 5 is not. That's the stuff you should know. The dogs of the Dow. There's 30 stocks in the Dow. What are the dogs? The bottom 10. in regards to the highest yielding stocks of the Dow. The 10 highest yielding would be the ones on the bottom because their prices are down. They're yielding a lot more, right? Bottom line is you buy that and hold them for a year or so, and they believe that maybe those that are at the dogs of the Dow will become the winners of the Dow, and the other ones that were on the top will become on the bottom, you know, that type of a play. Small firm effect suggests that the return diminishes as the size of the firm rises. In other words, small sized companies, small cap companies outperform large cap companies. Well, learn more about that issue. So the bottom line is there's a whole bunch of these anomalies. You know, what's not on here is the NFL anomaly. Or excuse me, the Super Bowl anomaly. Anybody know what the Super Bowl anomaly is? You might say, yeah, are you kidding me? A Super Bowl anomaly? Yeah, somebody did some research, and they said anytime the NFC wins the Super Bowl, the market goes up. If the AFC team wins, the market goes down. All right, I don't know if that happened, but that's enough. How about the hemline anomaly? Hemline? Yeah, they used to say as women's skirts or dresses, you know, the skirts went up higher, market went up. If they dropped below the knee, market went down. Again, somebody had nothing else to do with their life, and they did some research and said, based on this, and they kind of and said, look at the markets are going up here, and so they wrote it up and published it, and somebody likes it, and then they're following the hemline. You know, I know those are out there. Please understand me. I don't think they're going to test you on the hemline effect or the Super Bowl effect. These are the ones that they're going to be looking at. So do yourself a favor and learn about the anomalies. Let's go to the random walk theory. We're just about done, and we're going to get to the time value. The random walk theory is, you know, the random walk theory really was established before the efficient market hypothesis. And what's the idea behind this random walk theory? You know, and if you just look at the top bullet point, it says that it does not mean that security prices are randomly determined. Heck no. Security prices are a product of their what? Of the information known, and the stock price reflects what the stock should be selling for. Okay? Okay, so it says here, it seeks to explain why prices tend to seemingly drift randomly around their intrinsic value. What's intrinsic value? The price that you'd be willing to pay for it. How do you determine the price you're willing to pay for it? Well, you might look at the current dividends, the growth of the dividends, your expected rate of return, and you will determine, hey, I'd be willing to pay this price for this stock because I believe it will give me what I'm looking for in regards to the type of a return. All right? Well, they're saying that, you know, that price changes every day. It goes up or goes down a lot of times. Why? Well, because of the following. This new information that comes in the marketplace comes in randomly, and the reaction is pretty instantaneous. You know, as soon as that information is known, prices will move. But here's the bottom line. Not everybody sees that information at the same time. Not everybody responds to the information because maybe they don't know how to research it, and they didn't do the research. And by the time the investors are aware of this new information, the price has already changed. That's the random walk theory, okay? The implications, you can read these implications, and that kind of, we don't have to go through that anymore. I think we're all done with the efficient market hypothesis. So what I'd like you to do is go back into your, at the beginning of the book here, and let's get into this time value of money stuff. Get your calculator, get yourself a piece of paper, and let's kind of take this to a new level, as they would say. Let's go for it, man. So give me a second here to get my time value in front of me here. There we go. All right, time value of money concepts. The realization that a dollar received today is worth more than a dollar received in the future. Let's see, if I have a dollar in my pocket today and I choose not to buy the loaf of bread, and I wait a whole year and I take the dollar out of my pocket, will I be able to buy that loaf of bread? Well, if that loaf of bread went up to $1.05, I cannot buy that loaf of bread. Now, don't tell me that you can go to those second day, that day-old bread and buy it there, because it won't be the same price, and it's just as fresh as what you get in the stores. And there's always angles, and people can always, but it's the idea of purchasing power. Okay, that inflation will erode the purchasing power of a dollar held. That's why when you invest, you hope that you're going to be making some money on your money, so that you can be able to purchase something in the future, or use it to live off and buy things in the future and pay bills in the future, so on and so forth. All right. So they make that statement: the power, that the dollar received in the future is worth less than the dollar received today. So just keep that in mind. I got $1 in my pocket. I hold on it for a year. Can I buy as much with that same dollar? Okay. And there's reasons why you want to learn about time value. It helps you do a whole lot of things. Someone once said, hey, money makes money. We know that. And the money that the money makes will also make more money, so that's your compounding effect. The process of expressing the future in the present, and of expressing the present in the process of expressing the future in the present, or expressing the present in the future, in essence, is time value of money. So let's move along here. Do we all know the rule of 72? How long does it take for something to double? Yeah, that's pretty easy. You just divide your interest rate into 72, and you should be able to determine how long it would take for something to double. So if I had an 8%, take 72 and divide it by a 8% rate of return, and in essence it's saying, hey, in 9 years your money will double. If I said, hey, I want my money to double, and I've got 6 years to go, how long, what kind of a rate of return will I need? Well, take 72 and divide it by the number of years of 6, and you come up with, you better earn a 12% rate of return on your money, because after 6 years you would have doubled your money. That's your rule of 72. How many people ever use this rule of 72? I do. It's just a quick version of saying, I doubled my money. Well, how long did it take you? Well, 5 years. Okay. Well, what kind of rate did you get? You can play with it. There's the rule of 116. Anybody know the rule of 116? How about someone tell me, what does the rule of 116 do? The rule of 116 is the idea of tripling. So the rule of 116 is the tripling of the money. Divide the rate into there, or the number of years, and you can determine about the rate. Now, just remember, these rules of 72 and the rules of 116 are truly just kind of rules of thumb. They're approximate values. If you actually go to your calculator and do the the time value calculation, it will be the more exact number there. It won't be the rule of 72 number or the rule of 116 number. This approximates the value for you. All right, enough of that one. We're going to get the time value in a second. This is just the picture of present value to future value. You can kind of look at that. When I get into the doing the calculation, we'll go back to that page. Time value of money variables. Okay, so here's the bottom line. You see this page here on time value of money variables, and I'm looking at page to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm looking at what page? I'm looking at page 3-1. Okay. So what I want to do on this is go to a white page. And here's the stuff that I want you to kind of write down for yourself. Okay? And we're going to start talking about the rules. If you follow the rules, you're going to be doing real well for yourself. If you look at the top of your calculator, if you have a calculator in front of you, which I do hope you do have a calculator in front of you, and I'm using the Hewlett-Packard. If you have a Texas Instrument or a Sharp or something, I don't know what yours looks like, but they always suggest that we use the Hewlett-Packard in the CFP program. You're not required to, but it works. All right. On the top of the calculator, you have buttons. Now it depends on either the 10B, the 10B2, the 10B2 plus, whatever, but the top buttons look like something like this. N is on the far left, followed by the next button is your interest rate button, followed by your present value button, followed by your payment button, and followed by your future value button. So there are 5 variables for time value of money. N represents time periods, I, interest rate, PV is a lump sum invested today type of thing, payment is a dollar amount that's going to be consistently invested over a period of time, and future value is the outcome, either how much did it make and what is it worth at the end of the period of time. So what you want to do is you want to, in essence, you look at a timeline, and if this is a timeline, this point right over here is point in time 0, the starting point. I don't care if it's January 1st, May 14th. Hey, whenever you start is the beginning of your timeline. And then if I put a marker right here, that's your next time period. Is that 1 month, 1 day, 1 year, 1 week? It all depends on what you tell it to be. And the one over here is your second time period. Okay? So N represents time period. So here's what I want to do. If you have a calculator in front of you and it's a Hewlett-Packard, first of all, let me find out with a vote, or give me a green check if you have Hewlett-Packards. All right, so Valerie does, Rebecca does, anybody else have a Hewlett-Packard? Dan does, Heather does, and y'all do. All right, good. Now, when I turn on my calculator and I see in my display window zeros, how many zeros do you have to the right of the decimal point? Well, they tell you in the insurance course, oh, we want you to have 4 zeros to the right. I don't know what was magical about 4 zeros to the right, but let's assume you're going to go with that 4 zeros to the right idea. I'm okay with it. It's not like I don't think that's that's wrong to use. But how do you get those 4 zeros to the right? Right, on your calculator, on the left-hand column down there, remember columns go up and down and rows go. Yeah, columns are up and down, rows go left to right. So in the first column, all the way down on the left-hand side, you have a button, and it's gold looking. Some people it's orange, some people it's but that one, not the blue one. Some people have a blue button too, a gold and a blue. It all depends on what kind of calculator you're using from Hewlett-Packard. But the gold button, okay? And then if you look near the bottom of your calculator, you get the one that has the equal sign. Underneath the word equal, or above, it's above the word, I think. Depends on, again, which calculator we're using. I'm holding in my hand the old 10B. Let me get my 10B2. I got that here in me. All right, on the 10B2, yeah, I thought so. It has the letters DISP on the 10B2. DISP. Let me ask a question. Does anybody have the Hewlett-Packard 10B only? If you have the 10B without the Roman numeral 2, give me a red X. That means you have the 10B. Nobody's got that. All right. So I would assume then you've got the 10B2. Is anybody here using the 12C? The Hewlett-Packard 12C? No. Okay. So we're using the 10B2. All right. And some of you have the 10B2 plus. All right. So your word DISP is on the bottom. Okay. So if I want to set it to look like 0.0000, I would hit the gold button, hit the display button, and then hit the number 4 button. Gold display 4, and you'll see the window says 0.000. If I want to make it 9 zeros, hit gold display 9, And eventually hit 9 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, that's all there's to it. Let's go back to goal display 4 and leave your calculator at goal display 4. All right, moving right along. When you turn your calculator on, your window shows those zeros. If you hit your gold button and then hold your on button, no, excuse me, I don't mean that. Let's see how do I do this. Okay. If you hold your clear all button, on the 10B2, the clear all button is located right below your gold button, and it's a C, and it probably has the letters clear all underneath it. Okay, so if you hit your gold button and your clear all button, what does your display window say? Mine says 1 PYR. I leave my calculator at 1 PYR for everything in the whole wide world for the rest of my life. I will never change it to 2 PYR, 4 PYR, 12 PYR. So if you learned that if you're doing compounding monthly, you should change it to 12 PYR, well, go ahead and do it because you learned it, and if you're comfortable with it, do it. But I will tell you that I never learned it that way, and everybody who learns it the way that I'm going to show you doesn't make a mistake in time value of money because they tell their calculator what they want it to do. They tell their calculator what they want it to do. So they tell how many compounding periods there will be because it's set at 1 per year. So if it was 10 years and it was monthly compounding, 10 times 12 is 120 compounding periods. So they put in 120 in. How would you do that? If it was 13 compounding, 13 years of quarterly compounding, and if you can't do it in your head, you would just go 1, 3 times 4 equals 52, hit your end button, and now you've got 52 compounding periods in your calculator. So that's why I leave mine at my 1 per year, and I will tell my calculator what to do. All right. So let's stay with what we're doing. I'm gonna get a new, cleaner white page up here. So I'm gonna go to a new one. I'm gonna go back and rewrite the fact that we have the N, the I, the PV, the payment, and the future value. All right, here's the rules for time value of money. Whatever you are solving for, put below the line. So let's make it simple. I'm going to solve for future value. Look at where I wrote it. I wrote it on the left-hand side here. I solve for future value. I'm going to take the other 4 variables and put it above the line. And it does not matter what order I put it in. In other words, I could say I'm going to solve for future value, and I could go with the PV first, the payment second, the N. I don't care what order you put in above the line. Whatever you're solving for, put below the line. Next rule. Whenever you spend money, change the sign. So what do I mean by that? Let's assume I'm going to invest $10,000 as a lump sum. $10,000 as a lump sum. All right, I'm finding my present value. That's my lump sum button. I'm going to put in $10,000. 10,000 goes in. I said change the sign. Go find your calculator and find that plus minus button. It's located on the 10B, on the Hewlett Packard 10B in that first column, 4th row. It looks like a plus/minus. That changes your sign. Why do you have to change your sign? Because this is a financial function calculator. You have to change the sign. That's why. And when you change the sign, if you don't change the sign, you could come up with an error. Because you always have to find, something's got to have, somewhere there's going to have to be an outflow of money in time value. Either you're solving for that outflow of money, or you are actually putting in that money. So here's the bottom line. If you are spending money or you're solving for what do you have to spend, that will be the change sign button added to that particular button before you push it. Okay, and it's going to be 10 years from now. So I'm going to put the 10 right in here. And it's going to be a 7% rate of return. So I'll put the 7 in the I. And there are going to be no payments. All right? So what's the answer? Well, that's simple. And after you solve for the answer, I don't want anybody to erase what's in their calculator. So I'm pushing that calculator right now here, but can somebody tell me what the answer is? Anybody want to tell me verbally or write it on the chat? What do you come up with as an answer? Because I want to make sure we all have the same answer. $10,000 invested for 10 years at 7%. Does anybody have an answer? $10,000. 10 years. 7% interest. I've got an answer. Anybody? How about this? I want to put the answer down and you tell me if you got this answer. $19,671.5136 because I got 4 places to write a decimal point. If you have that, give me a green check. Or tell me yes or whatever. All right, so you should have that. If you don't have that answer, don't erase. And so what I'm going to say to you, if we do a calculation and you don't get the same answer that I've got, don't erase. I'll show you how we could find out where you made your mistake. Because there's a recall button, and we'll recall each of your inputs, and we'll be able to say, oh, there's your mistake. All right, so don't erase anything. So right now you should have this, what's on the screen, in your calculator right now. So what was my first rule? Whatever you're solving for, put below the line. Put the other 4 variables above the line, and then fill in the blanks. If you spend money, change the sign. All right? Well, now we're going to add, and you say, well, did I really have to put that 0 in the payment button in the answers? No, you did not have to do that, but I will highly recommend that you do that, because then you've got a process that you've learned. The process is put what you're solving for below the line, put the other 4 above, and fill in something for each one of those. It forces you to go back to the question to make sure there were no payments.
Hey, Tom?
Yes,
now,
sir.
When I did it that way, I came up with the answer of $1,381,000, which we all know is wrong. Now, when I do it without putting that 0 in the payment, I do come up with a $19,671. So I don't know what's going on there.
Okay, so go ahead and put that 0.
3 times.
All right, do me a favor then, Dan. Here's what I want you to do.
Yeah.
Clear everything off your calculator.
Right.
And do it again, putting all those numbers in, including the 0 in the payment, hit your future value, and then leave it alone and tell me what you got. Do it one more time.
Give me a second. I get the $1,308,000. But I noticed when I press. Go ahead.
All right. Now, what I want you to do is, there's a recall button on your calculator. The recall button is in the second column, the 4th row. It's got the letters RCL.
Right.
All right. Hit the recall button and then hit your N. Tell me what is in the screen.
10.
All right. Hit your recall button. Hit the I.
7.
Hit your recall button. Hit the PV.
0.
All right. We should have $10,000 in there because you.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But, well, as I went through that I'll do it again. I'm not going to tie you up because you got other things to do. But I noticed when I hit 0 and then payment, 100,000 came up, and I don't know why. So
yeah, well, that's why we're going to see. First of all, when you clear your calculator, how do you clear it?
That gold key and then clear all.
And the clear all. Okay. Now do me a favor. When you hit that gold key and then the clear all, and you're holding the clear all button down, what does your window say?
1 payment per year.
Okay. All right, so you're set up. Do you see anything else in your screen besides the zeros?
No.
All right. So then let's try it one more time and put in those inputs: 10N, 7I, $10,000. Hit your change sign in your PV button.
I do have that. Okay, now I've got the minus 10,000.
Zero.
Oh, you know what? I just figured out what I did wrong.
Okay, what'd you do?
I didn't press the present value after the minus 10,000.
Okay, that's true. Okay.
Okay, it came right. That I was skipping the one step. I didn't press after I hit the plus minus. I didn't press payment.
All right.
Present value.
That's okay. Hey, that's why we're pricing. Now here's another thing. We all got these numbers in front of us. Everybody's got the answer. Future value 19,671. Okay. All I want you to do now is I'm going to override the 0, and we're going to put in $150 as a payment. So I could go 150. Since I'm spending the money, I have to change the sign. So I hit my sign change. Here's the rule. If you ever put any money in the payment button, you have to say to yourself, am I doing it at the beginning of the period or at the end of the period? So I'm going to draw a box over here. I'm going to make it into 4 squares. I'm going to put the letters AD and OA. AD stands for annuity due. Annuity all right, you know how to spell annuity. All right, due, D-U-E. That's your AD. The one on the bottom is ordinary annuity. Ordinary annuity. So here's the point. Where does the word annuity show up in the term annuity due? It shows up at the beginning. So that means if I went and said that the payments were at the beginning of the period, it would be an annuity due calculation. If I said to you, no, the payments were made at the end of the period, the payment would be called a payment of an ordinary annuity. All right, so you won't, there's no AD button and OA button, but what you look in the screen, and either you see nothing in the screen or you see the word begin in the screen. So look at the 5th column of your calculator in the 2nd row under the letters MAR. Okay, under the letters MAR, that button that has the MAR, and underneath it, it has BEG/END. That's for beginning and end. That's in reference to your payment button. So if my window has nothing in it, I'm in the end mode. If I hit my gold button and that MAR button, and I look in the window and there's nothing in the window, then I'm in the end mode. Like I said, if I hit it and the word begin shows up in the window, I'm in the begin mode. So here's the point. Whenever you put any money in the payment, you have to make a decision. Is that payment going in at the beginning of the period or at the end of the period? That's what that rule is all about. All right? So, having said that, I want you to make this payment a annuity due payment. So I'm putting in $150 each and every year for 10 years at the beginning of the year. So I dumped in $10,000 initially, and now I'm going to go add another $150 to it every year for 10 years. What's going to happen to my answer? So what's the future value? And what I do at this point, because I had something in the payment button, I usually label AD, so that means, man, I must have had a payment at the beginning of a period of time. All right, so let me put mine in here real fast. I'm in the begin mode. I've got an answer. Does anybody want to tell me what their answer is? Somebody. Yep. All right, 21. You got it. 21,889 and 5 cents. Let's make that payment at the end of the period. Just go in there, hit your gold, and hit that end button or the MAR button. Change it to the end period. All right, so all I did was change my window. Now shows a future value, and I want to sell for future value of an ordinary annuity. Hit the future value button, and my answer changes to $21,743.98. Doesn't it? Everybody got that? Yeah. Because we're not putting the $150 in on January 1st. We're putting it in on December 31st. So we had a whole year before that first 150 got in there. So that money didn't make money for that first year until we got it in there. And then that last payment went in there on the 10th year, right before I looked at my future value button. So that didn't have any chance to compound. That's all it is to it. All right, so now, as you notice, we didn't change the N or the I. Why? Because I said the payment was a one-time payment per year. I'm going to put up here a new page, and we're going to do the calculation again. Okay, and let me rewrite up here on the top. We have an N, we have an I. We have a present value, we have a payment button, and we have a future value. Okay, I want to solve for the future value. I put the other payments up here on the top, and it doesn't matter the order I put them up here. So I'm going to put the other four variables, at the top of the page. And we're going to start with the problem. Here we go. I'm putting away $5,000 lump sum. 5,000, change my sign, present value. I'm going to put away $50 every month. Change $5, $50. Change my sign every month at the end of the month. So I know it's going to be an OA, ordinary annuity type of calculation. I'm going to do it for 10 years. Well, wait now. I just said my payment is monthly. So that means I got 10 years times 12 months. Hit the equal sign. I put 120 in as my N. I could have done it in my head and just put 120 in, but I'm just showing you it's not that difficult to do. So now my payment and my N are thinking the same way. I got to make sure my I thinks the same way. So that's your new rule. Whenever you put something in the payment button, make sure that payment is thinking the same way as your I and your N. So if I said this money was monthly payments, then my N needs to be put into the monthly approach. My I needs to be put into a monthly I. Well, I said I had a 7% rate of return. Well, divide that 7% by 12, and you come up with what? 7 divided by 12 equals, you come up with a 0.5833. Let's go ahead and solve for the answer. Okay, now let me put my buttons in here. I got an answer. What's your answer? Somebody. I'm looking for an answer. All right, Valerie's got 8,654. Anybody else have a different answer? Because I got a different one than that one. Yep, that's the one I got too. Nope. Well, you guys got different. I got 18,000. Now, Valerie, don't erase yours. I got 18,702.5473. Now, I know why, Dan, you got 18,701.96. You want to know why? Dan, did you just put in the 0.5833 because I said that's what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the learning point on that one, because you are going to have a little different answer. When you put in the number 0.58, let's do this here, 0.5833 and hit your I, what you really have in there are all these zeros after that. But when I do 7 divided by 12 equals, 7 divided by 12 equals, and then I hit my gold display 9, I've got in my calculator 0.58333333 indefinite. So that's why I've got a little different I than you do. That's why your number is a little different than mine. See how that works? So be aware. That's a great, glad it happened because I wanted it to happen somewhere. So when if you put, right, so you might say, well, gee, what are you doing on the exam? Well, on the exam, they're probably going to have 2 places that are right at the decimal point, and someone might just put in 0.58 and they'll have a different answer. So they're going to give you a little range on the answer, and they might say your answer should be approximately $18,701. And if you're at 18,702, you're going to say, okay. That's what's going to happen because, does everybody set their calculator the same way? And the answer is no, not really. Why would they set it to 4 places to the right? Some people just set it 2 to the right. So if you had a 2 to the right, it would be a 0.58. Well, no. And if I did it 7 divided by 12, it would be a 0.58, and hidden inside the calculator is 333333333 all the way through the end. That's why. All right. Learning point. All right, so what did we do? The N, the payment, and the I, all were thinking in monthly mode. And that's why you got your answer. Now, having said that, what if we changed the payment to the beginning? Well, if you kept all your stuff in there, all you do is hit your gold in the begin button, and you'll have a different answer. Will you have an answer that is a higher number? And the answer is sure, because if you start your payment earlier as opposed to later in the month, you have more compounding going on. That's why. So it'll be a higher number. All right, so let's go back. Let me get a new page up here, and let's see if we've got the rules. Okay, remember there are 5 variables, right? Always 5 variables. And why do you want to put in something in all 5 spots? To make sure that you were following a process, to make sure that you didn't miss something in the question. And that if you put something in the payment, you said to yourself, man, I better follow the rules associated with payments. So what are the rules? Number 1, whatever you're solving for, put below the line. Let's say I'm going to solve for the N. Put the other 4 variables above the line. Present value, future value, payment, and I. Okay? Whenever you spend money, change the sign. $10,000 lump sum, change my sign, present value. I don't know, my future value is going to be $30,000. Do I change the sign? No, because I'm not spending that money, I'm going to receive that money. And I was going to put in I was going to put in $125 payment at the end of each month. So 125, I'm spending it, put 125 in there. End of each month, I better label it ordinary annuity, because whenever you touch the payment button, you better put your calculator into the mode, the begin mode or the end mode. So I label it so I know I should be in the end mode, which means that there should be nothing in my window. And since I put that payment in there and I said it was at the end of the month and I was getting a 6% return, then I better say to myself, well, 6 divided by 12. 6 divided by 12 equals a 0.5. And why is it a 0.5? Because I'm saying my I and my payment are going to be thinking the same. Which means that when I get my answer, this answer is going to be a monthly answer. So let's see what the answer is here. 10,000. Change your sign, present value. $30,000 was what I was going to be getting into the future. I had $125 change my sign payment, and I am in the end mode, and I had a 6% return compounded monthly, so it was a 0.5. How many months did it take me to get there? Anybody have an answer? Bye, Heather. Okay. Yeah, I got 90 now, but those are months. 90.6228. Divide that by 12, and you come up with your number of years. 7.55 years. So it's a process. Makes you see that there's 5 variables and you can play around with it. That's all time value. So now you can go ahead on your own, and there's a couple of sheets there that have a couple of problems, and those are so simple. You should be able to do that. But what you've got here is regular, normal time value. So what I mean by regular, normal time value is the following. And I'm saying this because I want to distinguish between normal time value and serial payments. In normal time value, this payment of $125 is consistent. That's your normal annuity type of calculation. Same dollar amount each and every period of time. If we get into the world of serial payments, here's the difference. In a serial payment, if I said it was a serial payment, what happens? If I say it's a serial payment, not an annuity payment, but a serial type of a payment, then each and every time period when you're investing into the future, this particular payment is going to increase by the rate of inflation that you tell your calculator all about. So serial payments has your payments increasing. So in other words, they are not normal equal, they are unequal cash flows. They keep changing. Normal, going back to the normal side, normal equal payments is what a regular annuity does. Serial payments is not normal equal payments. It's unequal cash flows. Having said that, let's take a look at one of your slides here. That's your ordinary begin and end mode. We got this inflation adjusted return slide. Find that inflation adjusted return. And one thing, all this is being recorded, so those that didn't have to leave will be able to come back and be able to pick up on it if they need to. All right, so we're going to say, okay, I'm going to keep going. I want to finish it so that's on the record. All right. Inflation adjusted return. A special formula is required if you ask for an inflation adjusted return or a return in today's dollar. So if you had a 7% return on your money, 2% inflation, they said don't take 7 divided by 2 and just use 5. Use this formula. They used to call this formula the step-on inflation formula. Back when I took the program back in the early 80s, Herb Demmel, the instructor, called it step-on inflation. Why did he call it the step-on inflation? Because he wanted to make sure you knew that inflation was in the denominator. So you would step on the inflation there. Yeah, that's what he's trying to tell you. All right. So moving right along, let me just clear that off for a second. All right. So all they're saying to you is take the 1 plus the return. So 1 plus the 0.07 divided by 1 plus the inflation, 0.02, which is the same as saying, what, 1.07 divided by 1.02. What do you get when you do that? Okay, let me get my calculator in front of me so I can run the numbers with you. 1.07 divided by 1.02 equals 1.0490. Okay? 1.07 divided by 1.02 equals 1.0490. Then you're going to subtract 1 from it, so minus 1. Then hit your times 100, and you come up with an answer of 4.902. Okay? So if you were doing the keystrokes, and it shows it here down here on the bottom. I knew there was a reason. 1.07 divided by 1.2 is 1.049. Then you subtract 1 from that, because it says, and when you subtract 1, and then you multiply it times 100, you come up with an answer of 4.902. That's the interest rate you're going to use, not the 5. Now, I'd like to show you a shortcut to doing the same thing. You make a decision if you think you want to do it this way. That's up to you. You don't have to. But I learned another method, and it's very simple. Take your 7% after-tax return, subtract your inflation from it, and you got 5. Take your 5 and divide it by 1 plus the inflation rate, 1.02. If you take your 5 and divide it by 1.02, you're going to come up with 4.902. So I don't care which way you get there, just get there. Either remember this formula, and remember I told you maybe you might want to get a notebook and keep all your formulas or all your keystrokes on separate pages and then identify what they are and get yourself a practice problem so you will always remember how to do the inflation-adjusted interest rate to be able to do an inflation-adjusted return, which is to be able to help you calculate for a serial payment. You're going to have to know how to do this inflation-adjusted return when you're calculating for college costs, when you're calculating for life insurance. So you got to know how to use serial payments. You need to know how to do this interest rate. So that's how you do the interest rate. Okay? All right. Having said that, go to your next one. Wait, we'll come back to capitalization of a number. Now these are all those time value ones. Okay. All right. Keep that other thing in mind. Let's go to this one real quick. Capitalization of a number. You know, one thing about this capitalization of a number calculation that they show you here, it is not a time value. This is not time value of money. Okay? This is purely a play on money. That's all. I'll give you the story on this real quick. Back before the comprehensive exam, they used to have in the CFE program, you would take a class, and you would take a final exam. If you pass that exam, you put it in your pocket. You take the insurance test, take the class, take the exam, pass it, put it in your pocket. Take the investments, take the class, pass the final exam, put it in your pocket. When you passed all the tests, you get your CFP. Now they said, you still got to do that, but then you got to take this comprehensive exam. Well, when we did it that other way, this problem of capitalization of a number was always on the test. It was the most missed calculation in the course. And the reason is because people would try to answer the question by doing time value of money. And it is not a time value of money calculation. All it is the following. Just remember the following. Whatever dollar amount you're solving for, that you want to have, divided by the client's required rate of return, or they're not so much required, by the rate of return that they give you. Just remember that this has got to be thinking the same way. In other words, if I said this one here says I need to draw $15,000 per year, earning 5%, and they want their money back. $15,000 per year, and we want to make sure we get our money back. Okay, we don't want to do not use my capital. They call that capital preservation in some places. All you do, I want $15,000 per year. If I divide it by the 5% annual rate of return that I will get, the answer is I need $300,000, because if you take $300,000, multiply times 5%, you get $15,000. Well, how long is this going to last for? As long as the investment is I invested, and I can get that rate of return. Well, what if I said to you, I want $7,500 every 6 months, but I want my money back at the end of the period of time? I want it for 13 years. This is where someone gets screwed up on this. I want $7,500 per month, and I'm going to be able to lock in this 5% annual rate of return. I want $7,500 per month, and I want it for 13 years, and then I want my money back. How much do I have to invest? Just do what I just said down here. Remember, how much do you want? Oh, I want $7,500 per month. Okay, and you had a 5% annual rate of return. All right, make it into semi-annual rate of return, because this is $7,500 every 6 months. So what is 7,500 divided by 0.025? Still $300,000. And I want it for 13 years worth of time. 26 years. Fine. Hold it and then cash it in and get your $300,000 back. There was no time value of money calculation. Here's my money into the bank. $300,000 into a CD. Pays a semi-annual rate of return based on a 5% annual rate of return. Well, they're going to give me $7,500 every 6 months. And I locked it in for 13 years. At the end of 13 years, they're going to give me my $300,000. That's called capital preservation. Don't use my capital. If I say use my capital, that's called capital utilization. That's your annuity payment. You're using up your capital. On an annuity payment type of calculation, and doing this time value using the annuity approach to it, you're using up the principal. That's capital utilization. If I want capital enhancement, which is, hey, not only do I want the payment coming out, but I want my investment to grow, that's called capital enhancement. Keeping up with the purchasing power. So capital preservation, don't use my capital. Capital utilization, use up my principal. Capital enhancement, increase my principal as well as give me some income every month. All right, that's capitalization of a number. All right, moving along. These are calculations that you can do on your own. They already got the answers for you. But the only difference in this type of thing is the payments Right, they're leaving it 1 per year here. Let's see, are these all 1 per year? See, what I don't like about this, they only use 4 steps. I like 5. They're solving for the interest rate. Okay, they can solve for the interest rate. They don't. Okay, go ahead and solve for the. Okay, come on, Tom. Where's your pen? Come on. There we go. They're solving for the interest rate. You got a future value, present value, and put a payment up here too. Go look for it. Did he talk about a payment? Well, no, there's no payment up there. All right, then put a 0 in there. So just stay consistent with the 5 steps, the 5 parts, 5 variables. They didn't change the mode here. Okay, here's changing the mode. They should make sure in the begin mode N is 18 gold because they changed your payment. Where does it say here? Yeah, they had a change of payment here. So they had to change. See this, Hewlett Packard? They get a 12 gold PYR. I don't like that. Leave it at 1 per year. And you tell it what you want to do. That's not hard, is it? All right, so those are, again, you could, as long as you can skin the cat any way you want, but you won't go wrong by leaving it 1 per year and telling your calculator what you want to do. Here's your serial payment. And what do I want to tell you about the serial payment is the following. On the serial payment here, make sure you know how to read the problem. You have to change your interest rate. There's your formula to change that interest rate. You're solving for the payment. They tell you it's at the end of the period of time. You know, on a serial payment, read what it says in red. Because it's a 3% inflation, you must, whatever the payment is, you must increase it at 3% each and every year. So all this type of a calculation, they do show you on the next page some of the proof of what happens on the growing at 3%, on the inflation, your pot of money growing at 8% each and every year for 4 years. It's got to add up to this particular number down here. So it's a matter of how you read it. Okay? So let's do it real quick. It says, in terms of today's dollar, Ben Watson needs $216,000. In terms of today's dollars, so does he need $216,000 4 years from now, or does he need the equivalent of $216,000 in today's dollars in 4 years? And the answer is yeah, he needs the equivalent. In terms of today's dollar, he needs $216,000 in 4 years. On that next page, it says here, the problem states that he needs 216. I'm looking at the bottom of the page. He needs $216,000 in today's dollars in 4 years. So take your 216 as a present value. 3% as your I, 4 as your N. There are no payments involved in this part. And say, hey, this is the value that we're going to have to get at the end of the period of time. You're going to have that 243 at the end of the period of time. So you can go back in a serial payment type of calculation and say, hey man, I need in the future the equivalent of 216,000 by putting in this serial payment in inflation adjusted return. You're going to be able to eventually get to that, whatever this 216. Remember, the 216 is worth $243,000. You know, in the future. You got to come up with, well, what's the first payment going to be? Because it says 3% over the next 4 years on inflation. All your money's going to earn 8% per year on an after-tax basis. And then the question is, what is the serial payment that Ben needs to make at the end of the first year? when you do this calculation here, you're coming up with this particular number. That is not the answer. Because, read what it says, according to the problem, 1 year has passed, so that the payment has to be increased by 3% to account for it. So, what's the point of this? Do you remember when I said to you that the annuity payments are the same dollar amount? In other words, they're equal payments. This is not a regular annuity problem. This is a serial payment problem. And when you have a serial payment problem, you have to increase each year by the rate of inflation. So if you solve for the payment at the end of the period of time being $50,223, okay, I'm drawing a timeline on the bottom of this here, point in time 0. I'm saying, what is the payment that has to go in here at the end of the period of time? Well, if it was a normal annuity, it would be $50,223 in here each and every year, the same payment. That's a normal annuity. No, this is not a normal annuity. This is a serial payment. All right, so since the payment's going in here at the end of the year, you got to take this normal payment and multiply it times 1.03 to put a higher dollar amount, which is $51,729 in at this period of time, because $50,223 times 1.03 is $51,729. That's what goes in here. And then the next year, you take that number and you're going to multiply that number times 1.03 in theory and put that in. So let's go look at what he did on the next sheet here. End of the first year is $51,729. We know that that money is going to grow at 8% for 3 years that it's left, because you start at the end of the first year. In the second year, you're going to take that $51,729, increase it at 3%, and then that's going to earn 8% for 2 years. And then you take that $53,000 and increase it at 1.03 and put in 54, and that's going to earn 8% for that 1 year. And then that last payment, increase at 1.03, is not going to make any money because it was put in at the end of the period. Add up all that money, you come up with the total of $243, which is what the client needed. So all I can say to you is, if your mind is spinning a little bit on the serial payment, it's practice makes perfect. You have to, when you get a chance, sit down and see if you can conceptualize it to yourself and run the numbers. It works. If you don't inflate it in that first year at the end, and you inflate it after that, you're going to come up about 7,000 short, because you didn't do the proper, you didn't put the proper dollar amount in there, and that compounds itself out. So your mistake is about $7,000 worth of money. If they say you're going to put the payment at the beginning of the period of time, you start off with that money, whatever the answer is when you did the serial payment calculation for the begin mode, and then you take that begin mode one and multiply that for the next year at a 3% inflation rate and run it that way. You'll come up with the same answer. So this area of serial payments is usually a confusing page for many people. You better know how to do serial payments and understand how it's done and why it's done that way it is done. Because when you do a college education calculation or you do a insurance calculation or you do a retirement planning calculation, you need to know how to do serial payments. Very, 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 very important. Last but not least, and we'll end on this. Sorry for keeping you. is the time value of money rules. These are different types of rules. And all it's saying, hey man, if either the time frame is longer or your interest rate is higher, your future value will be greater. Well, that's common sense. If your time frame is longer and you're discounting back to the present, with a longer time period, you're going to have a smaller present value because that's your lump sum money that has a longer period of time to compound out in the future. So remember, you compound into the future and you discount back to the present. I'll say that again in English. If you get a timeline here, you're compounding out into the future. How about COMP for compounding out into the future? But if you're out in the future and you're coming back to the present, you're discounting back to the present. And so they're saying, well, if you have a longer period of time, your lump sum will be smaller because you have more time period for it to compound into the future. If we're compounding in the future and you change your time to a longer period of time, you're going to have a larger dollar amount because it's got more time to compound. Go down to the next bullet point. If either the time frame is shorter and or the interest rate is smaller, at which you're compounding, you know, what will happen? Your future value is smaller. All right. So in other words, here's my timeline. It was there, and I'm going to change it now to be here. Well, if I put the same dollar amount in here, and I cut back the time period, my future value here is going to be less than the future value out here. And that's all it's saying. My future value will be smaller or less. And vice versa on the present value. When you discount back, you're going to have a larger sum of money to get to the future, depending on those concepts here. So that's just a matter, I don't know if it's a play on words or whatever you want to call it, but those are true statements. If you're not used to playing with money, you might have to repeat this yourself or run some practice problems to see that work. But how important is time value of money to you on your comp exam? Take it to the bank. There will be a problem or two or three using time value concepts. Whether it's serial payment or regular time value, annuity type payments, whatever. Follow the rules. Whatever you're solving for, put below the line in time value. Whenever you spend money, change the sign. Whenever you touch the payment button, you got to think, am I in the begin mode or the end mode? And my end, my I, and my payment have to be thinking the same way. And you're good to go. You'll get all your time value correct. That's it. We're done. Packet number 2 is done. Packet number 1 is done. Tomorrow, Dorothy will load in that quiz, and you got yourself a week to get the quiz done. We will be getting together on Monday. Packet number 3, do your reading ahead of time. And let me read what it says here. This has been extremely helpful. Thank you. All right. I'm happy to have taken the time. Hopefully it helped. All right, guys. Wednesday night. Enjoy yourself for the rest of the week. Enjoy your weekend, but you've got to do reading. Don't enjoy it too much without getting your reading done. Get your reading done, then enjoy yourself. And we'll see you on Monday. Take care, everybody.